All right, I just checked, and the waveform does spike and clip when I scream like that, so we'll try not to do that anymore for the sake of everyone at home. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 9, The Home Stretch of Acquired, the podcast about great technology companies and the stories behind them. We are coming to you live today from the University of Washington. Audience, can we hear you? I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. Let's talk about trucks. 18-wheelers, semis, the long-haul guys. 1 out of every 4 of these that you see on the road is completely empty. Truckers finish a job and then pick up the phone to find their next load, which could be a state or more away. You might think they should be able to just have their boss or coworker figure it out across multiple trucks and coordinate. But get this, 90% of trucking companies have 6 or fewer trucks, and 97% have fewer than 20 trucks. There are over 1 million independent trucking companies, or carriers, as we'll call them tonight, in the United States alone. So enter Convoy. Today we are going to talk about this company, which has only existed unbelievably for 4.5 years, and their ambitious plans to make it easy for any truck driver to find a nearby load, transparently see what they'll get paid, and do it all, as you would expect, right on their smartphone.
We've existed for 4.5 years, too. We're almost as big as Convoy.
Yeah, this was like a sick dose of perspective. When we were doing the research, David and I realized that the Convoy was started between the time that we had lunch and talked about doing the show and when we actually started the show. It's freaky to see, close to 1,000-person company at Acquired, well on its way.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about a new partner of ours here on Acquired, Legora, the agentic operating system that is redefining how the world's best legal teams work.
Yep, it's sort of obvious that AI is going to completely change the legal industry. I bet most of you listening have dropped a contract into some sort of AI chatbot out there. Legora took that insight and asked the question, what if you really built something with that power from the ground up for the legal industry?
So the founders did exactly what great founders do, operate with obsessive customer focus. They embedded inside a massive law firm for months. They sat with the lawyers just watching how the work really gets done.
And that's how you get features that customers love, like tabular review, where you drop in a folder of hundreds of contracts and it pulls every key term into a grid a lawyer can actually work with. Legora's bet here is interesting. Since it lets each lawyer handle more complexity, any given person can increase the quality of their work and do higher value work. And this means that the pie can grow even as each individual task takes less time.
And they recently launched Legora Agent, offering greater intelligence and performance. The agent lets lawyers set an objective. Then it can handle the planning and the execution and delivery of the final product. Legal teams get to maintain full control and transparency since they're still involved where judgment is required.
And Legora works where you already work. You can use it within Microsoft Word while redlining or drafting. The early Legora numbers essentially speak for themselves. When they have a head-to-head pilot with their top competitor, they win 70% of the time. Legora now has over 100,000 lawyers on the platform from 1,200 legal teams in 50 countries. And crazily, they went from 1 million to 100 million in ARR in about 18 months.
Truly insane numbers. And that is the real test. Plenty of things demo well, but the question is whether a busy associate actually reaches for it during crunch time, or whether a partner trusts it before going into a conversation with a major client. If your legal team wants to check it out, whether you're a law firm or you're in-house at a company, you can learn more at legora.com/acquired and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Now, listeners, if you want to go deeper on company building topics, or you just want to support the show, you should become an Acquired Limited partner. We have a second show where we get into the nitty-gritty with expert operators and investors, like the CEO of Webflow and partners at Benchmark, Emergence, and other great venture firms. You can become an LP by going to glow.fm/acquired or by clicking the link in the show notes, and all new listeners get a 7-day free trial. Of course, there are tons of ways to be involved with the show. You can join the Slack available at acquired.fm, rate us on iTunes, and we always appreciate any shout-outs anybody wants to give on Twitter or the social media platform of your choice.
Or in person.
Or in person. This is like really crazy doing the show and like looking up and seeing people and like you're going to hear all the parts where we say which we always cut. You're going to hear like, you know, when I look at David and I'm like, that didn't make any sense. Can we delete that in post? And anyway, with all that, on to Convoy.
Woo, on to Convoy. Hang on, Dan. So when Ben and I started thinking about doing this crazy thing and planning for our first independent live show here in Seattle, this is actually our second live show. Our first was thanks to our friends at GeekWire. There was only one company and one entrepreneur that we wanted on the show, and that was Convoy and its founder and co-founder and CEO, Dan Lewis. Not only because, as Min mentioned, it is, I think as we speak, the highest valued startup in the Pacific Northwest, having raised a whopping $668 million in total capital, but more so because I think its story illustrates a really important new theme in tech that we haven't talked as much yet about on the show, but I think is going to shape many of the next generation of great technology companies. And that's taking all the lessons in tech from previous generation companies like Amazon, where Dan worked, Airbnb, Uber, DoorDash, all of them that were focused on consumer-driven businesses, and using that same tech to disrupt super large, super old school B2B industries. So obviously, Convoy is at the vanguard of this, but they're not alone. There's Flexport out there, which folks might have heard of, RigUp in oil and gas, even our own portfolio company at Wave, QuotaPro, which does this in the scrap metal industry. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming years. So we are super, super excited to have Dan Lewis, co-founder and CEO of Convoy, up to join us. Come on up, Dan.
Hello. Hi, I'm on. Perfect.
Before we dive into the typical acquired history and facts and go back to 10 years before your birth and all that, I want to ask first.
You guys can tell me about that.
We'll actually start 100 years before your birth, but can you give us a quick high-level overview to just set the stage for our audience of, there are many companies in the trucking space. What exactly does Convoy do? You connect existing truckers, not autonomous truckers, people who are driving rigs today, with people that want to ship stuff.
That's right. So Convoy is a digital freight network. And if you think about how trucking works, as we mentioned earlier, it's extremely fragmented. The average trucking company has 3 trucks. So you have a bunch of mom and pop trucking companies on one side and a bunch of companies that want to ship freight on the other side. The mom and pop companies don't have a way to go source that business directly. They don't have a sales and marketing team and operations team. So they work through middlemen, typically brokers or large asset-based carriers that also run a brokerage on the side. That's extremely fragmented. The participants in the middle are trying to, as individuals, maintain relationships with truck drivers and shippers and connect the dots. So any individual person only sees a minuscule piece of the pie, can't really identify all the opportunities, optimize the system, and figure out what's going on. So what Convoy does is we're replacing the traditional brokerage model. We're aggregating that long tail, and we're getting them all onto the same platform, all onto the same technology stack, so that we can learn about them, know where they are, and then optimize their routes, keep them efficient, keep them productive, fewer empty miles, reduces a ton of waste in the system, helps shippers get trucks more flexibly and faster, helps truck drivers get jobs that are more convenient to where they're located and what they want to do, and effectively like just creates a more productive trucking system. So to your point about, not just building software, kind of replacing the system, that's what we're doing with technology.
Yeah. So, okay, to rewind. You grew up here in Seattle, birthplace of Amazon, long before Amazon was built. What was your family like? What was your journey that ended up in this?
David, we are going deep.
Yeah, here we go. All right. Yeah, so my family is born and raised in this area. My dad went to UW. I lived actually when we were building a house in Northgate. I lived in Ravenna for like a year as a kid. So I was very local. My grandfather started a mom and pop kind of office supply distribution company out of his garage in Ravenna. My dad and uncle worked with that for a while, still doing that kind of stuff today. So kind of small business family, but not really a tech family. I have relatives in Seattle that, did biology for Washington State. I have other ones that work for the ferry department. A cousin of mine, manages one of the fire stations in Seattle. A lot of kind of different local jobs, but not so much directly in the tech industry growing up. I just happened to grow up at a time when it was flourishing and Microsoft was coming on the stage, and it kind of got me interested in tech early on.
Yeah, so you went to Yale. You were a liberal arts major at Yale. And then, importantly for the story, you joined a consulting firm after graduation. What were some of the projects you worked on? You were at Oliver Wyman, right?
Yeah, I was at Oliver Wyman.
And Oliver Wyman does a lot of work with logistics-based industries, airlines, and the like. What did you learn there, both in terms of exposure to some industries that would come in helpful later for Convoy, but also just skills that you learned?
Yeah. So I did learn a lot about supply chain logistics when I was working there. I worked for the Panama Canal for a little while. I lived in Spain, and I worked for Welling Airlines, and we did a bunch of other projects with airlines, some projects with Boeing, actually. So there were a lot of different logistics problems that we were working on. In terms of skills, I think the thing that was the most impactful for me in consulting, and it's something that kind of bugged me for a long time in my life, to be honest. I remember even in high school and junior high, I did a lot of different things. I was always the kid that did 7 different activities, sports, student government, tried this hobby, tried that hobby, wanted to learn this thing. And I never really went deep. And I remember thinking at one point, I'm kind of jealous of the person that found that one thing that they really love and they're super deep in it. And I kind of was wondering, maybe I could just pick something. And I never was able to just settle on one thing. So consulting really fit me. I did 26 projects probably over 4 years or so. But I kept wondering, when am I going to figure out that thing that I really love? And I bounced around. I did lots of different things: marketing, product management, engineering related work. And it wasn't until I started a company that I realized the thing that I was actually really good at and that I had trained myself to do over and over was to very rapidly understand new spaces and be able to start things and kick things off and very quickly get something off the ground. And that was a skill I think that I came from consulting initially.
Dan, did you find that you were great at that, but not as operational as you would like? The knock on people that start in consulting or spend too much time in consulting is always oh yeah, they're the smartest person in the room. They can definitely tell you how to solve your problem, but when it comes to doing it, it doesn't work. Was that your experience or?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. When I first started, I don't think I recognized, but that actually was the case in consulting. I thought that I understood things, and then I realized I was just doing the strategy portion.
Because you went right from consulting to a startup, right?
Well, the latter half of consulting, that was all operations. So actually, when I was in Spain, I was running a procurement project for 7 months, and it was end-to-end designing all of the specs for how we're going to do maintenance for aircraft engines, APUs, working with 30 different vendors on a 6-month procurement process and getting in all the details of finance and operations and logistics. So that's when I realized that I was learning that for the first time, and a lot of the other stuff was strategy. So I feel like I had the benefit towards the latter part of my consulting career of really getting into the weeds and working on some really meat and potatoes kind of projects, operationally minded. I then went pretty far away from that, though, to be honest, after consulting into tech, and I didn't do that again for a while.
After 4 years of this, you come back to Seattle, which is now, so what year are we in now when you joined Skydeck?
When I joined Skydeck, 2007.
Okay, so tech is a thing. Convoy hasn't been started yet, but so the Seattle startup market isn't quite what it is today. What prompted you, other than perhaps wanting to come home, to you're working in logistics at airports. I'm going to go back into the tech world and join a crazy new startup.
Yeah, and for people who aren't from Seattle, the way to think about this is Amazon is in one building at this point.
Yeah.
So Skydeck was in the Bay Area. I actually didn't leave right away. What I did, and this is something about how I just got into startups. I always wanted to do something in tech. When I was 10, my dad worked for US West, or the local phone company. He brought home an IBM XT, I remember. really kind of, DOS 3.0. And I just kind of learned how to use it. I taught myself a bunch of things on there. I started with BASIC and just taught myself a bunch of really simple things. Wanted to figure out how to optimize the computer so I could play more video games. And got online, very early on through like the library system and started teaching myself how all that stuff works. So I kind of was really interested in tech early on. Got away from it a while, but that's how I made money in college. Like I made money building websites for the athletics department. I did a lot of IT support and help people back then to make, 10, 15 bucks an hour just to have some money in college. So it was sort of something I developed early. And then when I was consulting, I was like, I want to go back into tech. I kind of had this bug. And I didn't know how to quite get back in there because most tech companies and startups look at consultants, and aren't that interested, at least back then. I mean, especially in Silicon Valley, a lot of the early stage ones were looking for folks with more technology experience. So
I think it really was part of, in a lot of ways, you guys today at Convoy share a lot of heritage with Uber. And I think it was them that really were like, oh yeah, no, we're going to hire a bunch of people from Goldman. We're going to hire a bunch of people from McKinsey and bring that operational, know-how into the startup world. But yeah, back then that was like not cool. It was
definitely not normal. And I hustled. Like I remember taking vacation from Oliver Wyman for like a week and a half. And all I did was network. I just wrote a list of everyone I wanted to meet and then found ways to meet them and then would ask them who else they knew in the space. And I started working on startup ideas. I would just take time off to work on startup ideas. And I had this idea for location-based services like data research company and surveys company. So I started diving really far into that, wrote a whole business plan, met maybe 40 or 50 people, and never decided to do it. But I realized really quickly the power of networking and information. I would have lists of people that I would write down and all my notes in my meetings with them. And then I realized after 10 or 20 meetings, every meeting I went into, I knew more about the space than the person I was talking to, and I could introduce them to all these new companies. So it became like this information broker role. I finally networked my way into Skydeck. You
should have been an associate at a venture capital firm.
I guess so. But I tried early and that didn't work out. But that's how I found Skydeck. So I actually networked my way in while trying to start my own thing, met this group. They had founded a company in New York called Vindigo, which was the early mobile app developer for Brew handsets running on Verizon.
Oh, man.
Had some success doing that, moved out to Silicon Valley to build this new company. I was compelled and basically somehow convinced them to hire me. They were all engineers and they're like, why would we hire you? You're this consultant.
Was Skydeck also focused on Brew handsets?
No, not at that time. It was pre-iOS.
Yeah.
iOS came out right in 2007. I started this company in mid-2007. So they were thinking about how do we, social networks and the social graph was the big thing back then, and mobile, location-based services, things are very early. So they were thinking, hey, you have all this data in the phone bill that's like someone's social graph. Can we let you unlock that and combine that with your email and contacts
and
start
message records,
all your text messages and phone records, and start to combine your contacts, so all of a sudden you can see your real social graph. And is there a way to monetize that or to plug that into other systems that are being built at that time?
So the big reveal is this company ends up becoming Hiya, right?
I mean, it went through a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah,
not directly.
They didn't end up there.
Yeah, which is a spam call blocking service now.
Yeah, and they actually did that. So they had a call system specifically designed to help you identify if someone was calling that you didn't want to pick up. They built it. They had they got it pretty far actually, and they had a partnership with Google, and then Google kind of shut it down and built it. They basically said you can't do this anymore on Android. You can't get access to the phone records, so we shut that down, and then they had something similar come out.
You have this startup experience with these crazy pivots. You end up coming back to Seattle, then our fault for not realizing it was with Skydeck, but coming back to Microsoft.
Yeah.
So your first journey now, you've gone from consulting, startup, big tech company. What did you learn at Microsoft?
And I was very lucky to get a job at Microsoft at the time. It was 2008. I got back to Seattle. I left my job in the summer of 2008, went on a round-the-world trip.
Wow, good timing.
Came back in October 2008. While I was gone, Washington Mutual went out of business, so my bank went out of business. I had left a bunch of stock, I had most of my money in stock at the time, or stocks, and I wasn't really paying very close attention to it. So most of that was gone. I didn't have a job because I had quit my job. I thought I was going to start working with some of the partners from the management consulting firm I'd been at as a contractor to get my feet under me when I got back to Seattle. That was no longer available when I got back. So I remember meeting a friend of mine at black bottle in Belltown, a guy named Fritz Landman,
Yeah.
who I'd gone to college with. And he was at Microsoft at the time. And I was like, hey, what should I do? Like, it's kind of looks pretty bad out there. And he's like, I don't know. And he like had a text message from somebody pretty high up at Microsoft saying, we are hiring no more consultants, like starting next month. So I was like, I guess that's not going to be an option. I just did the thing I did back when I was looking at Skydeck. I just hustled again and did a meeting every, 5 or 6 meetings a day, networked, created my list, tried to find a job, got no interviews, couldn't get an interview from Amazon, couldn't interview from anybody at the time because the market was in such a rocky state. And fortunately, I knew some people at Microsoft through Fritz who gave me a shot at an interview, and I got a product manager job there. So, really
and you hadn't been a
hard to get
product
that.
manager at Skydeck, right?
I had not been a product manager at Skydeck, but I basically was, because we were so early. I just thought like one. So I was able to get through the interview. I want to give that context because that was a point where you imagine, I grew up in Seattle, went to Inglemoor, local school, somehow ended up at Yale. There's a story around that. Worked really hard for 5 years, was really frugal, saved. And then in 2008, made that one decision, was kind of offline for a few months and came back to Seattle basically with nothing. No job, no money, and didn't have a place to live. Wow. So I have seen that side of it. And, I didn't panic. I just knew I could work hard and find a job. But I think I have a lot of respect going through, seeing 2001, I graduated in 2003, so I went through the 2001. There were very few jobs when I was graduating. Again, really struggled to get that first job. Worked really hard. A lot of friends of mine took a long time to get those jobs. 2008, so I feel like I've been through a couple of these really hard periods, which I think made me really value the opportunities that I've had. And so when I got that job at Microsoft, I was very proud of it and very excited about the company. I grew up in Seattle, looking at Seattle Times, reading about Microsoft growing up. I remember looking at their stock price when it was printed in the newspaper, so intrigued by this growing company as a kid. So it was a dream for me to get a job there.
Which this is a unique Seattle thing. So I didn't grow up here, and nowhere in the U.S. has reverence for Microsoft like Seattle does. I mean, if you grow up here, it is there's so much giving back to the community. It created so much wealth for the community. It put Seattle on the map in a lot of ways. And in Ohio, I was oh, well, yeah, those are the bad computers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Of course, you ended up working for Microsoft for many years, so hey.
Yeah. But you're right. That was kind of the foray into Seattle for me, and so I was, I didn't take anything for granted because I realized we're in a world of plenty right now. We were just talking about how much capital is available. Convoy's been able to raise a lot of money. Everyone that's graduated in the last 10 years has only lived in an environment where everything's up and to the right effectively. And I've lived through 2 other cycles now. And one I was, again, just out of college, one was later. But I think it's made me never take for granted anything we're doing. And I don't rest and feel like we're there. I'm just we got to build a really healthy, sustainable business and hurry. And we're taking a big swing. Yeah. So the more money you raise and the bigger the opportunity you go after, the more challenges you face in terms of getting there.
So Microsoft, then you're I'm going to go back, do the startup thing again. Wavy. Mm-hmm. Another startup, we were investors when I was at Madrona. Great product idea. Didn't end up realizing its vision. Gets acquired by Google.
And Dan, you were head of product there, is that right?
Yeah, I was head of product. I mean, it was a pretty small, so I did a lot of stuff like marketing, products. Okay. Planning, a bunch of different things, sort of jack of all trades, I think, in that experience.
So how long did you stay at Google? And then was it because the team, Adrian moved down to Mountain View, right?
Yes.
And then did you stay in Seattle, and is that how you ended up at Amazon?
That's right. So the company was acquired in 2011, if I remember correctly, or in 2010, 2011. And ultimately, the entire team moved down to the Bay Area to join the machine intelligence group. And I learned an incredible amount at Wavy. I decided I wanted to move to the Bay Area. And so I was working remotely for Google for a while. I was looking at several options in Seattle to join some of the teams here. And I just decided I didn't want to be part of a remote office at that time. I think Google's actually scaled pretty significantly since then. Mm-hmm. But I remember going down to the Bay Area once to meet some of the leadership of the team that I may have been joining. There were 2 or 3 options in Seattle. And I distinctly remember sitting down with them. And I won't say the person's name, but I remember they were we just have a love-hate relationship with our remote offices. And I was like, oh.
What's the hate part?
I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, we like to keep a lot of the planning and a lot of the figuring things out down here, and then we have some satellite teams up there that kind of execute on specific pieces. I was like, that sounds fine if you're in maybe engineering. What I wanted to do was very different than that. So that was actually the thing that caused me to not stay at Google. I was like, I don't really want to have that experience where I'm kind of supporting a remote office. I want to be in the thick of it. I looked at several different companies at that time. Someone I had networked with early on when I was doing Wavy, reconnected with them. They were at Amazon and was really inspired by the team they built, the organization they're building. So that's why I went to Amazon.
Dan, have you ever had a job that you applied for, that you apply and then you're like, I hope they get back to me, without having a relationship with someone there?
Have I ever gotten a job or applied to jobs?
Have any of the jobs that you've ever held ever been from a job portal?
I think so. There are two, actually. Okay. My freshman year internship, the internship I had after freshman year, I think I applied to an online posting. I joined a company called PR.com in Seattle,
Good domain.
which was acquired by Wagner Edstrom. And so very 1999 name, PR.com. We did PR for tech companies. I didn't even really know how to be an intern. I think I just went on vacation once for a week, and they were like, "You're supposed to tell us." I was like, "Oh, okay." I was kind of out of know. And then the other time was I applied to some not a job board, but companies came to Yale looking for candidates, and there was some companies on campus recruiting, right. So I went that channel. But after that, no. After that, it's always been through the relationships that I built, and I very often hire I reach out to a lot of people and I do a lot of personal sourcing, and that's always been a big part of my thinking.
That's great.
I have sent out a lot of applications where I didn't get anything.
Oh yeah, you and me both.
I was trained. I got that job I mentioned out of Yale. I think I got that in the spring. I sent a lot of resumes out and applied to a lot of places. I had taken my junior year off and went to Chile. So I became fluent in Spanish. And the summer before and after, I worked for my family's delivery business. So I didn't have the post-sophomore and post-junior year strong internships. Yeah. And coming out in 2003, again, tight job market, I didn't have I could do it, but I didn't have the story. So the traditional channel didn't really work for me. And then back again in 2000 and, over time applied to different roles. And again in 2008 when I was applying, that just didn't work at all. So I think when I've mostly been looking for roles, I've been in situations where that just didn't work. And that's why I've kind of trained myself to not really go down that path.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to tell you about a longtime friend of the show, Vanta. AI has scrambled the whole security picture. It used to be that you proved that you were secure once a year, an audit or a static PDF, then everyone would nod and you're done. But in an AI-first world, that doesn't hold up anymore.
Yep, your risk surface changes every week now. A vendor turns on an AI feature or someone writes in a new model without telling IT, and your posture is different than it was last week, let alone at your last audit. Vanta's own research found that around 70% of companies have this quote-unquote shadow AI running with no security review at all.
Right. And that's where Vanta comes in. They're the leading agentic trust platform, meaning they've built the thing that closes the gap. And the way that they close that gap is Vanta Agent. Think of it as a GRC engineer, that's governance, risk, and compliance, except that it's software and it doesn't sleep. It finds the issues, drafts the fixes, and cuts the time that you'd spend on vendor assessments in half.
In half! Which is exactly why more than 16,000 companies today run on Vanta. Companies like Ramp, Cursor, and Snowflake all stay audit ready and catch the risks that crop up between audits across every vendor, every AI tool, the whole environment.
And that's the real value. Trust has to be continuous now, which is why Vanta automates your security, your compliance, and the work to earn and prove trust. We're huge fans of Vanta over here, and literally hundreds of acquired listeners have become Vanta customers at their companies over the years. So you can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/acquired. That's VANTA.com/acquired for $1,000 off. And just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right, so Wavy happens, you end up at Amazon. I want to ask one question on Amazon before moving on to the founding of you founding companies, and then we'll get to Convoy. Recently, Amazon has sort of been dubbed the CEO factory, and we've seen data of all these great CEOs at big, fast-growing companies that have come out of Amazon. What is it in your mind that creates that?
There are a lot of other companies too, I think that do a good job of spawning CEOs. I think one thing that Amazon does is that it expects a lot of ownership from the people that are in the role, and it kind of has a culture of assigning, a single-threaded leader or a person who's ultimately responsible for the outcome of the thing, at least in my experience. And that design puts you in a position where you feel responsibility across multiple functions, even if you don't own all those functions. And I think that sort of cross-functional leadership at many levels of the company and strong push towards ownership is really important. And I think you see that both on the business side and on the technology side. When I was at Wavy, we tended to bias towards hiring a lot of engineers from Amazon. And of course, there's great engineers at every company, but the experience we had was that they had been expected to own more of the end-to-end aspect of their system versus just one piece. And I think I saw the same thing on the product and business side as well. I think that probably attracts people that want that and then trains people in how to think that way.
Yeah.
So then, you can slot into those opportunities.
Is there a proactivity and a hustle that doesn't exist at other bigger companies? Is that part of it, or is that sort of overly mythologized?
I've only worked at several, and I didn't spend as much time at Google, but I have been at Microsoft and others, and I think there is a distinction that's true on that. And so I'll give you the example. When I got to Amazon, and this is not maybe the typical role, but I didn't have a team. They just said, look, you're a person who's going to build a team. Go do some research. In this general scope of the world, figure out what Amazon should be doing and why. And I wrote 5 6-pagers in my first 2.5 months. I pitched them to the leadership
6 pages,
team.
Of course, being the canonical Amazon
document, which I
no
did
PowerPoint, 6 pages.
Just write a doc. So I wrote 5 or 6, 4 or 5 docs actually that were each different business ideas. Wow. And I pitched them, and I got funding for 3 of them. And then over the next 2 or 3 months, I went out and hired the teams. And
who were you reporting to at the time?
A guy named Michael Doherty, and then his skip level was Sebastian Gunningham, who was actually on the that list as well, the CEO factory list, because he's now the co-CEO of WeWork, which is a whole different entry strategy.
Pause, backpedal.
Whole different thing. But he was creating this area for this to happen. So that was really, the fact that can exist in a company is pretty inspiring. And then what I realized after I'd been there for a while was the planning process encourages people to come up with new ideas and pitch those ideas. And if they get the pitch, if they're able to build consensus and a storyline around it and demonstrate some early value, they can go build a team around it. And data wins. So if you want, I remember there's an example that ask a question, get an answer on Amazon. That's a feature that exists on Amazon. You can ask a question on a product page, and other customers or manufacturers will answer that. That product was developed by someone else in the same organization that I was part of. And I kind of was worked on that a little bit, but it wasn't, I didn't directly develop that. That was originally given the thumbs down by leadership. But the team said, okay, fine, we're going to figure it out. And they went and emailed a bunch of customers, asked them questions, and came back and said, actually, if you email customers and you ask them questions, they will answer them at this rate. And then the person who had said no was like, oh, I thought they wouldn't. Turns out they will. Go do it. Right? So someone just said, I don't agree with you. I'm going to go show you the data. And they got a team out of it, and they built it. And so that sort of internal culture of funding good ideas, and if people do the research and put the hustle in to figure it out, funding that has created, obviously, a very broad range of businesses and products that Amazon has created, and a culture of kind of starting new things. So I think that's probably unique, actually, the range of things they're doing.
So you leave Amazon to start a company. Are you writing 6-pagers, and was Convoy originally a 6-pager? Was that the format in which you thought about new businesses?
I didn't do it that way. And Convoy's a combination of influence from many different companies, actually. No, I wouldn't say just Amazon. There are a couple things we took from Amazon that we thought were really important, but we've taken from a lot of experiences we've had. Convoy, the original experience coming out of Amazon, was a lot of research. I wrote a document, but I wrote I didn't think about it. I wrote like different forms of documents to capture and structure my thoughts. But it was, again, I need to talk to a lot of people. Like, let's find the problem. And I didn't really know exactly where the problem was going to be. I was like, logistics seems really interesting. And one of the things was, I kind of had this moment at Amazon where I was like, it looks like the supply chain just won. And the feeling was, okay, when online, and I told this story maybe once before, but not very often. When online shopping started, you had to decide, am I going to go to the store and buy it last minute which means I get to procrastinate, which people love to procrastinate, or I have to buy it online 5 to 7 days in advance before I need it, which means I can be lazy, but I can't procrastinate. So you have to be lazy or procrastinate. And that's like two really strong human conditions that people really want to do. And this goes back to my cognitive science at Yale. People,
this is like our TikTok episode.
People want those things, right?
Yeah.
And you had to decide. And then Amazon Prime comes out, and all of a sudden it's 2 days. So all of a sudden I can order it online, be lazy, and I can be procrastinate and order at the last minute. And so what happened was people changed their behavior. You started waiting to order it 2 days in advance if you're a Prime customer because you could. And once you waited till 2 or 3 days left, where else are you going to buy it? No one else delivers in that time frame. So the secret was being faster than everyone else and creating that rhythm. It wasn't about the exact 2 days. It's 2 days was faster than everybody, so you would wait, and then you would order because everybody procrastinates. So you always wait. So people would wait till the last minute. Once that kicked in, massive shift of business to Amazon, especially for Prime customer, effectively a monopoly over like the purchasing in that time frame. When I saw the data and kind of understood the impact of that, I was like, wow, the supply chain just dominated. Like that is why people are shifting their behavior. They can't see it, they can't touch it. It's not about the location of the store, the parking. It's about 2-day delivery making me procrastinate and buy online from Amazon, right? Super powerful. All these other businesses started reacting to that. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out something in supply chain. I talked to other investors in Seattle. Hadi Partovi was somebody I spent some time with early on who wanted me to kind of look into trucking specifically in supply chain. I was looking at several parts of supply chain. I then took direction, started diving into the trucking aspect a lot more. And there are 3 or 4 interesting businesses in trucking I uncovered. But that was just through talking to people.
Yeah.
Just hustling and getting out there to truck stops and places
Well, this
like
is where, so I think all of these threads of your background kind of come together here with Convoy. So even before you land on, you talk to Hadi and you land on trucking within logistics and then the specific marketplace idea within trucking, one thing you guys did that I never see any other companies do is you recruited your team before you had the company. So you and Grant Goodale, your co-founder, did you guys meet at Amazon?
Grant was on my team at Amazon, yeah.
But you had 5 engineers that were part of your team even before you had landed on the idea for Convoy, right? Talk us through how you thought about that.
I learned about this back when I was trying to get the job at Skydeck. I have a strong technical background and I know a lot about developing software now, but I'm not a software engineer. And so I realized, at least in my perspective, and some of the investors in here can decide if this is right or wrong, but trying to get seed funding, what I learned and felt early on was you kind of have to check 3 boxes. You have to have an idea that they can at least understand and believe is compelling and believe it has the right dynamics that you could return on the investment, right? It can be that kind of an idea. The second is you have to be a personality, an individual that is compelling to them. And I think a big part of that is, A, they want to believe that you're going to do the work, you're going to hustle, you're going to commit to it, you're going to get it done, you're going to be smart and thoughtful about your approach, and you have to convince hundreds of other people over the next few years that what you're doing is worth it.
Yeah.
So you have to be really persuasive.
Cool. I've heard you talk about this before. Many entrepreneurs can check boxes 1 and 2.
Exactly. I couldn't check box 3 of build it.
Yeah.
I couldn't build it myself. And I didn't believe that I could go outsource that to a contractor to build my idea. I knew enough about the ecosystem that I wasn't going to be able to attract the investors that I wanted and the supporters if that was my strategy for development. So I'm like, I need to get the best engineers around the table. Otherwise, I might not be able to raise seed funding. And as much risk as I wanted to take and as you take doing a startup, I actually wanted to minimize my risk in getting this thing going. And so what I did is I had a sense of some of the ideas that I wanted. I knew I needed a strong technical co-founder who knew how to build a startup. So I spent time trying to find that person. And then that was Grant, right? So Grant and I decided to do this. Then I went back to the team I'd worked with at Wavy, some of the people there, and some people I'd worked with at Amazon who some of them were there and some of them weren't there anymore. And I started just planting the seeds and the ideas. And I got a few of them to say, I'll do it. And actually a few of them said, I'll do it independent of the idea. Like there's 2 or 3 ideas, whichever one, let's do it.
That's incredible.
And so then I was like, okay, now I'm pretty confident. And that was what I needed. Then I put together the pitch deck and said, and we started kind of building it on the side. We started setting up kind of the development environment, deciding what we were going to build, kind of building some of the building blocks of actually getting an app developed, things like that, getting some of these things structured and organized, and started doing a bunch of research. And then that brought some of the engineers in. UW actually was where we started the company.
The table. I've heard you talk about the table. Was the table here at UW?
The table was here at UW.
Wow.
So Techstars has their office here at UW in the old law school library. That's where it was. So Chris DeVore let us sit at one of the tables. So actually, to go all the way back, so we started there, I guess I should say. Like, that's where we actually kind of like, once we knew we were going to do this, we went there. Before that, to be totally Seattle, to give all the context, like Maveron reached out to me and said, hey, we heard you're going to do this. We want to give you an office to work out of. And so I went down and worked at a Maveron for a while, and I knew some of the Maveron partners, and they kind of gave me that access and let me kind of get my feet on the ground, give me a place to start working in some infrastructure. So I did all my research there. And then I went to them and said, I'm sorry, I'm doing a B2B idea. Because they only invest in consumer.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, so I'm going to...
You're out.
Well, no, they were I was like, I should probably leave. They were great. They were really supportive. And then Chris was like, well, you guys can just use one of our tables, because we're not using our tables, we're between classes. So we sat at the table in that library, and it was so perfect. Because what ended up happening is we were in this fun, dynamic environment, a lot of energy in that room, a lot of people were coming in now, and it had this great feeling. It had a startup feeling before we started. So I had 3 of the 5 at that point that wanted to do it. And what we did is we just invited other people to come work with us. Because we had other
This
people
is such a great,
that were like going to do
starting
their own
a
thing.
company
A guy
hack.
that was on my team at Amazon had quit. He's like, I'm going to start my own like gaming related thing.
You're like, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And it was great. No, I mean, yeah, it's funny. If he was here, he would laugh at that, because I was like, great idea. Come work on it sitting next to us at this table. So he just started hanging out there. And then we just started adding people to this table, and then we would kind of get to know them, and then ultimately we got some little attraction, like, oh, this is interesting. So we kind of recruited the other 2 folks from there. Not everyone joined. Some people decided not to, and a lot of people weren't interested at the time. But that was kind of how we got it going. And that was the beginning. And then once we got funding, then we went and got our own spot.
So
Seattle, I would just say, just to be really clear, like the ecosystem in Seattle helped. Like we didn't have funding in those first 2 locations, and they gave us a chance to kind of get our feet on the ground in a great environment, which was compelling.
That's awesome. Did the thought occur to you that like, it's going to help us raise money, like, it's going to help me feel more confident about this enterprise I'm starting, but like, holy crap, we're hiring 5 engineers and we don't yet know, like we're not product market fit, like we haven't gotten any signal from customers that we're building anything remotely right.
That's true.
Well, when you put it that way.
Partially because I didn't know. So as I mentioned, I went out and talked to a lot of other brokers. I went out and talked to a lot of shippers.
Yeah, you notoriously hung out at truck stops.
A lot of truck stops. I did all of that stuff. So, and those were fun. I remember I've told this story, but the first shipper I walked in, panicked, asked where the bathroom was, because they like gave me a warehouse. I went to the bathroom, and left. Like I didn't know what to say. I was like, okay, that didn't work. So I went back to my car. And
Maybe you're just not CEO material.
The first truck stop I went into, same kind of thing. I went in there and I looked at all the people sitting at their, having lunch individually at each table by themselves. Everyone turns and looks at me when I walk in. I'm dressed not like a truck driver. And went back to my car and thought about it again. So my clipboard and Starbucks gift cards were effective, but not in that moment. But I learned a lot. And some of the companies along the way, what I found was most ideas I'd ever had in my life, including the location-based services like Data Research One and maybe 10 others, I had some really bad ideas.
Bluetooth-enabled diapers.
Really bad ideas. All sorts of stuff. This one actually, every time I shared it with somebody from the industry, they were excited about it and felt like it was necessary. So I got really strong positive feedback from the industry that I had never experienced before, and I never thought about something else. So I didn't know, but I knew there was a problem. Like I was really sure there was a problem. People were hungry for something to be better. I didn't know how to solve it. And so that was where we kind of started, and we brought in those folks. The best part is we did all this without ever incorporating. So we were just, we knew that was important, but we were very much, let's avoid the trappings of a startup. Let's just start building it. So we had the kind of, maybe there's some legal reasons not to do that probably, but we were like working out of these different offices. We were kind of getting people to sign up to work with us. We built our pitch deck. We were out pitching investors. We were working on the code with folks part-time at that time. And then we started the company once someone told us they wanted to fund. And then we needed a bank account. So we were like, oh, we have to have a bank account that you can fund because I can't just give them I use my phone number, my home address when we were first starting, which was a bad idea. Really bad idea.
Do you still get a lot of mail
I get a lot of phone calls too. I need to change the phone number. So I do a lot of customer support when I pick up for truck drivers. Or if they're looking next, someone's like, I didn't get paid yet. I'm like, okay, I'm working on it. But yeah, so that was the origin. But it was really funny. So Drew Houston from Dropbox, I think I've ever told him this, was the first one. Like everybody, we were gonna close, and it was like over a day, and he was like, "Oh, we gotta close." And I think that we set, our first bank account was Silicon Valley Bank. We realized we had to incorporate, so we got, we actually. I remember it was like Monday.
Drew wanted to invest. That was
He was going to invest. He was ready to wire before everybody else. Like, can I wire? I was like, oh, hold on. We're having some bank issues. Let me get back to you. and I remember, sorry, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus on that one. But
the issues being we haven't reached out to them yet.
The air cover. The issue being we haven't set up the account. But what we did is we reached out to an attorney. I won't mention who it was. It was on a Monday. And they were like, great, we'll do it. And I had an attorney that I knew pretty well, but my co-founder had reached out. And he was taking care of that. So I didn't even thought about it. We were running so fast that week. And I was like, oh, who'd you reach out to? And he told me, he's like, okay, sounds good. Let's get this started and set up. And then the person just didn't call us back for they were just quiet for 2 days. And we called them oh yeah, I'm on it. We're like, no, you said you would do it tomorrow. Okay, we're done. 2-day contract, we're not working anymore. I called someone I'd worked with actually at Wavia, Nick from Oric, who was the only attorney I'd ever worked with in this context, who I really liked. And he got it turned around in 24 hours. And then we opened a bank account and got our money. I think the learning from that is don't worry about getting all the trappings of the startup, I would say. All the things that kind of on paper designate that there's the startup. Just spend all your energy on, is this the right business? Right? Because none of that stuff really matters unless you have the right business.
Right. The startup isn't the legal entity in the payroll system and the IP assignment. It's having a thing that exists in the world that didn't exist before that customers want.
That someone's interested in, or that someone's willing to fund to figure out if people will be interested in it. Yeah.
This business that you're triangulating on that becomes Convoy of a marketplace of truckers and shippers, how did you get the initial liquidity for this to happen, right? Because it's one thing to say oh, hey, join my marketplace as a shipper, you can ship stuff and it'll be great and I promise it'll get there on time, and you've got one trucker that's 100 miles away. How did you bootstrap this?
Yeah. And I think there are a few people in the audience that have more long-term first-hand knowledge of this than I do even. So the way we originally bootstrapped it was, we made a mistake. We thought truck drivers would be compelled by our amazing vision. We thought the great design of our app and the vision of our ability to help them would compel them to download and use our app. We worked really fast. So we raised money in May, and then we raised again in July, our seed round, and then we launched at the end of August.
How much did you raise in May and July?
I think it was $1 million in May, $1 million in May, and $1.5 million in July, something like that.
Okay.
We built the app just for Android initially, a web experience, and a pricing model and matching model. And then we went to market. So it's the basic bare bones, right, of an experience. And we took this app, we went and showed a bunch of truck drivers. I remember going back to the truck stops and completely safe about this, but everybody in the company, when they saw a truck, would take a picture of the side of the truck and put it on a Slack channel. So we had this Slack channel of the side of trucks because everybody has their MC number and DOT number.
So
and
you can go
name.
look up those trucks.
You can look up who are these local truck drivers, all these small, because we didn't even know where to find them, even though there are online directories we discovered later, and there are way more efficient ways to do this. Driving down the road, taking pictures of trucks you're driving by and then posting to Slack is not safe. But we felt like it was important. So we just went to warehouses and just took pictures of trucks coming in and out. Or truck stops. We were just talking to people. And so we developed this local network of maybe, some trucks to call. And then we just went to trucks and asked them. And nobody was interested. We completely bombed. And I remember...
And this was a big part of I meant to cover earlier, but a huge part of the thesis that I imagine as you're building up this business plan.
The truck drivers use it?
Well, the truck drivers use it, but truck drivers have smartphones now.
Yeah.
These are the days when, this is 2015, everybody has a smartphone. Truck drivers, they were never going to touch software. They were never going to install a desktop in their trucks.
Yeah, that's right.
But now they have a smartphone. They have a computer.
Right. They were just getting smartphones then.
Yeah.
Right then. They're thinking about, which completely rightfully so, I want to get some work. we were realizing brokers are not love-hate relationship. I also heard that from truck drivers about brokers, right? There are a lot of kind of shady fly-by-night brokers. There are a lot of very respectable, great ones, but people, like, here's the thing that'll happen. This is, will happen. Someone will create a brokerage. They will go to a shipper and say, hey, I'm a broker. I can do your work for you. The shipper says, great. Here are these 25 loads to do.
And is it hard to get a broker's license? Like, is this a big hurdle?
It's not
or
that
like
hard to get a broker's
any
license.
single person? This is why there's a million.
There's the brokers. There's 18,000 brokers in the US. Yeah. So you can go get a broker's license. And most brokers are totally legitimate and do a great job. But sometimes a broker will do this. They'll go get work from a shipper. Maybe the shipper is going to pay them for 20 loads, right? 20 grand in total revenue. They go get trucks to do the job. The trucks complete the job. The shipper pays the broker disappears, right? Never pays the truck drivers. That happens. Or they don't pay them what they're deserved. So the whole idea of this middleman that kind of controls payments on both sides, and it's a zero-sum game where they're trying to pay the carrier as little as possible to make the maximum spread on every job. The truck drivers don't always love that, right? So coming in as a new broker.
Well, and that's the worst case scenario. But even in a good scenario, you're an individual broker. You're a human, right? You're thinking, how many trucks do I know? How many shippers do I know? You're trying to coordinate those trucks. And then you've got the payment issue, right? Like, you're getting paid by the shippers, but you're not getting that money right away.
That's right.
And then the truck driver, like, he or she is driving the load, right? And then they're like, well, I just worked. Like, I need my money. Right. I need to get paid. And the broker's like, well, I haven't gotten paid yet.
Exactly. That also happens. So there's a lot of discrepancies around how much you actually want to pay them. It's complicated. So basically, that's a situation where the truck driver doesn't always trust the broker. A brand new broker on the scene that says they have this app that's magically going to give you freight when you open it is not fully believable by someone who is used to load boards, which are effectively Craigslist, and brokers say, I have a load. The broker doesn't actually have the load. They just post it, so truck drivers will call them and say, yeah, I want the load. Oh, great, how much are you willing to do it for? $800. Oh, great, hold on, let me just double check to make sure it's still available. Hey, shipper, I can do it for $950, right? Like, because they don't have the load yet. So they're kind of playing both sides. This happens, and so then truck drivers don't always assume that when they see a load posted on these traditional load boards that it's a real load. Could be a phantom load, right? So that's the environment you're walking into. We're discovering this. We realize the truck drivers don't fully trust this notion. We're brand new. Our MC number, our official like motor carrier numbers of brokers, a day old. So like, who are you? So it was hard to get them on. So what happened was nobody would go on. And then we said, okay, we realized that tactics, the flywheel will not start spinning if we start with supply. So we went to
the orthodoxy is you're building marketplace, got to start with supply.
That's right. Exactly. That's what we thought. So, and we're like, you got to have the supply ready for the demand. Because Uber's model was they had to have a car ready because you're going to need the car in 5 minutes, right? What we realized was we could get a freight from the shipper and it doesn't pick up for 24 to 48 hours, maybe 72 hours. So what we actually figured out was the best way to build the flywheel was not to go start with supply. It was to get demand, take each individual shipment, go to the supply and say, I have a shipment for you. Do you want it? Yes, real shipment, I'm in. Great, it's waiting for you in the app. So then you go from a 0% conversion to like 95% conversion, where if the truck driver wants that job, they're going to download the app to get it, right? And so that ended up flipping it and making it go fast. So then what the secret sauce, the success factor for Convoy was about how rapidly we could onboard and evaluate a new carrier. So it was about speed of carrier onboarding became the most important thing because effectively the clock's ticking once you take the job from the shipper. We had to go get a new carrier into our platform, sign them up, train them to use the app, get them to download it, do the paperwork, get them to sign our agreement, and do the job in 24 to 48 hours. That became the like secret sauce for building the brokerage. And that's how we got the flywheel going.
Well, I think that's what's so cool about you guys and these B2B marketplaces is, again, you think about the consumer-driven companies, it's about how can I satisfy the product need of the consumer as quickly as possible. In these B2B marketplaces, it's about money. It's like, I have money, like I have a job, and I will get you the money as soon as possible. Like that can drive. And so the other thing that you guys did it was pretty early on, right?
Yeah.
Is you institute, we will pay you within a day of delivering the load, right?
That's right. Exactly.
How did you make that happen?
So that idea came out of, again, the flywheel works in our world. Not only do you need the driver to do the job, they need to download the app and use the app. And so a lot of work has gone into make that app as simple as possible. But we need them to use it. And one of the best ways to get them to use it was to say, if you use it throughout the job and you upload the paperwork to the app, then we can pay you really fast. And so it created an incentive for them to use the technology, which then reduced our costs and gave us the data we needed to run our business. So effectively, if I could pay the carrier 30 days before they're used to getting paid, the cost for me to finance that is a lot less than the benefit that I get from a carrier using my technology platform, from the data that I collect, the operational efficiencies that come from that, the visibility, and the network that I build. And so that was effectively a cost of growing the network faster.
There's this interesting sort of famous venture capital question that is, why now? What people have tried this business before, and people specifically have tried building a digital freight brokerage before. And so why now? And it is such a clear and present answer of course, smartphones came out in 2007, but like the broad adoption by everyone who drives a truck wasn't until the 2014, 2015 era. And once that happened, not only could you get them to upload this stuff, but like you could passively collect location data and just know like, hey, where are the loads? Like, we don't have to have people calling and saying like, has it gotten there yet? Like, you just know.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why it's important that they use the app.
I think that's what's cool. But it's not enough. You're just like, oh, all the pieces are there. There are companies out there that are like basically installing smartphone guts on trailers at this point, right? Like, you can sell software and try and be like, oh yeah, like it's better. Like, the industry should do this. Or you could create incentives like you guys did to make it economically better for participants in the ecosystem to do that. And the way you do that is you actually create a full stack company, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That was you could build software, and we could have built this software and sold it to brokerages. We kind of thought about that, and there were two big reasons we didn't do that. One is we really wanted to do something transformative. And it's very hard to change an industry by selling a software product to the person running the industry. Maybe that will drive their behavior, but it's probably not going to really drive massive behavior change. And they're going to dictate what they want from you. So you'll kind of build to their expectations and needs. They ultimately own it.
The analogy is those flywheel apps in taxis.
Yeah.
That wasn't what took over the world.
Yeah, that's right. And we wanted to be in that position. We wanted to be the principal in the transaction. We wanted to have the relationship with both sides, so we could not only improve the efficiency of the marketplace, we could go upstream into each of their businesses and solve their problems. Because ultimately that leads to a bigger total business opportunity. And we don't think this ends with truckload freight, right? We're thinking now about it. We've already built a transportation management system, a TMS software solution for medium shippers to use, that they can run all of their freight on. So they can actually book their loads on Convoy and book their loads on any other trucking company via Convoy's platform. And that starts to give us a bunch of other benefits. We do the same thing on the other side. So we can build out and out by owning that relationship.
And that's free, right? That trucking management system software?
Yeah, it's free for medium and small shippers.
So that serves as your top of funnel for the shipper side, where, hey, you may not be using Convoy today in the traditional way that everyone else uses it. Here's some free software. It'll provide all these benefits to you. Is that how you think about that?
Yes, it's still early, but there are a lot of actually larger companies using it too. We have companies doing 15,000, 20,000 loads a year that are using it.
Is the right analogy here Amazon Marketplace?
It could move in that direction at some point. That would be effectively really creating like a marketplace for other brokers as well. Today, we're not doing that. When a company is using that TMS, it's a shipper.
It's a shipper.
It's a company that's shipping freight, right? The company that's actually purchasing the shipping service.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to thank our longtime friend of the show, ServiceNow. If you are running a large enterprise, AI agents are likely spread across every team, and deploying them is no longer the hard part.
Yeah. The hard part is knowing what permissions they have, what employees are using them for, or what decisions AI is making. AI security for an enterprise at scale is not a small concern. Like, the risks are real.
Exactly. And the challenge with AI is governing it, securing it, measuring it, and making sure that it actually delivers value. That is why ServiceNow built the AI Control Tower.
Yep. AI Control Tower gives enterprises a single place to see, manage, govern, and optimize AI across the entire business. And it works with any AI, not just theirs. Every device on your network, every permission across every system, every AI agent visible and secure in one place.
And ServiceNow can do this because they've spent more than 20 years building the operational backbone of the enterprise, the workflows, governance, approvals, security controls, and institutional knowledge that power how work actually gets done across IT, HR, customer service, finance, and security.
ServiceNow already runs more than 100 billion workflows annually and trillions of transactions for more than 85% of the Fortune 500. So when companies need a place to govern AI at enterprise scale, they're building on a platform at the center of how their business already operates.
And in a future that isn't going to be one AI, it's going to be thousands of AI agents working across every function of the company. But the question is, who's managing them all?
So if you're trying to turn AI ambition into real business outcomes and make it work safely, securely, at scale, go check out servicenow.com/acquired and tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right, so Dan, I want to take us in a little bit of a different direction and kind of not catch us up all the way to today, but talk about some of these milestones in the company. Convoy has grown absurdly fast, like in revenue, in fundraising, in headcount, and every observable metric. Like it is outpacing the traditional startup. I mean, what you're 4.5 years in. So can you talk about some of the points where you made the decision to put the foot on the gas? And sorry for the anyway. How you made those decisions, the trade-offs involved in making those decisions. It just fascinates me that it is so aggressive.
You know, I think from the very beginning of the company, we believed that speed was a feature of a company. Like we've thought a lot about our values, who we want to be as a company. How do you create foundational values that lead to the experience you want to have as a business? And speed was always one of them. We believe that, as you said, 2014, 2015 was when truck drivers started getting smartphones. And prior to that, this isn't possible because you can't mail a truck driver a piece of hardware that they're going to install in their cab 4 states away when the job picks up in a day or two, right? It's just not a feasible thing. When we felt like the window opened, we realized it was a really good idea. There were other people looking at the space, and we wanted to move really quickly. So we did decide early on that this was going to be a feature of the company, and we were going to try to push ourselves. So in year one, I'll just walk you through the year one timeframe, which was very fast. We started hacking on it in March, incorporated the company April 1st, not on purpose, but like it's been fun. There's a couple things that we've now built around that. We, again, raised the money in kind of April-ish timeframe and kind of July, I think a little bit. And then, so I guess it would have been April when we incorporated, we raised money. And then we built it, like I said, launched it in August in a private kind of beta environment with 20 or 30 customers, announced to the world in October, and then raised our Series A in November and closed it in December. So it was a very fast first year. And
that Series A was a $16 million round from Greylock.
That's correct.
Which now, like, $16 million Series A seems reasonable. That was
very,
huge.
Very large.
And very fast.
Yeah, it was a very large. And again, that came back to the theory of we're going to try to go fast. We need to align around the capital that will allow us to go fast because we've felt like we've seen so many of these markets. And this was also in the earlier days of many of these shared economy and other sort of ride sharing type services where people saw how speed mattered and the first mover was able to get in a very advantageous position. It's not exactly the same in B2B and in hindsight, but at the time we're like, no, we're not sure, but we need to go fast. We don't want to find out too late that that speed was really important. So we built that, we built it quickly, and we determined that was going to be a big factor.
And is that because you thought, okay, competitors are going to see this too, someone's going to do it?
We thought people were going to get into it, and we felt like these opportunities don't come along very often. A technology changed that unlocked the potential to build this business, and drivers adopted that at this time. So it was an open window for this massive business to be disrupted. There have been a lot of companies. Coyote Logistics is a very innovative company that came along in 2006-ish. Several others have attempted to do innovative things as well. They just didn't have the smartphone. Mm-hmm. And it turns out with a transportation service and location where location is so critical, you couldn't completely disrupt it without that. And so that was why we're like, hey, speed's going to matter. So we really worked really hard. It made it, one of our values is always have a sense of urgency. We made a bunch of decisions along the way to do that. Even in the code, if one of our engineers was going to build something and was going to do it in a relatively hacky, unsustainable way, but it was for speed early, they would comment it out with CTFU, which was catch the F up, which was the way we thought about it. Like we just said we're behind. We don't know who we're behind right now, but we assume we're behind. Let's go fast. We wanted to do that, and in hindsight, I think it was the right call. We were able to kind of helped design the industry in the category. We're, of the independent startups, I would say the most notable brand. We were able to have more options when it came to fundraising because there weren't others that were ahead of us that had already raised from these investors. And we were able to build a strong brand and relationship with shippers, carriers, ecosystem partners, the industry, et cetera. Where right now, I still think we're a long ways away from success, but we have the opportunity now to be the company that really disrupts this.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had that if we would have gone slower. Now we need it, now it's really important. You can't keep the same mindset forever. You have to shift and evolve based on the conditions of the business and the environment you're in. But that was the right mindset for the environment we were in, the business we were going after for those first 4 years.
I love that first few milestones. Give us some more along the lifetime of the company, whatever you're willing to share, whether it's employees or customers or revenue or whatever, but help us understand sort of the exponential nature of those next few years.
For the first, I think 8 quarters or so, we were doubling volume every quarter approximately.
And that's GMV, the amount of...
Yeah, the number of shipments we were doing. We looked at it as shipments. Number of loads. That was probably not exactly that, but we doubled for quite a while.
Yeah.
We're not doing that right now. It's sort of, we reached the size where that'd be very, very difficult. But we've grown, we've more than doubled over the last couple of years, each year. And so that has been very aggressive, and it's challenging because if you're trying to grow your business at that scale and you're trying to maintain your culture and your identity and you're trying to hire efficiently and maintain the same kind of bar, it's very difficult to do at that speed. And I've just said this before, but it feels like we're a 4-year-old that looks like an 8-year-old. Because the outside world often looks at us and people that join from other companies and well, you're this company that has a pretty notable name now. You've raised a lot of money. You've grown to be pretty significant. You have a national presence. You have all these big customers relying on you. We're the biggest trucking company for several name brand, Fortune 100 companies now in the country. So we've really gone to be way beyond niche. But internally, we're 4 years old. And so to build this in 4 years and the infrastructure and the systems, they're just not all there. And sometimes I think we hold ourselves to an unreasonable bar in that respect. And I actually encourage our team sometimes to not even push us to get there. You actually want to be sometimes a little bit less developed because you can move faster and be more flexible. You don't want to look like a 10-year-old company when you're 4 years old. You want to be 4 years old. And so that's something that's really important.
There's 2, I think, really important strategic decisions in this that feed into this mindset of grow and scale fast that I want to ask you about. The first one is, back in the early days in the seed round leading up to the Series A, you were operating only in one corridor, right? One product, one type of trucking in one corridor in the Pacific Northwest, right? More or less.
Whatever trucking we could get.
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't sure exactly which category to do, so we were taking several different.
Because there are a bunch of categories in trucking of different types of loads, and then there's also geography. And then you guys had to make a decision about scaling. It was kind of like, if you use the analogy of like a consumer marketplace, like a Yelp or an Uber, you had one city that was working. Mm-hmm. And then there's the canonical question of what do you do next? Do you expand nationwide? Do you go to one other city? Do you do another? And for you guys, I think the question was, do we expand to other types of products of trucking, or do we expand nationwide? And you eventually made the decision to expand nationwide, right? Pretty early. Mm-hmm. How did you think through that? Because it wasn't obvious, right? You could say expand nationwide, but that means we need to have supply nationwide of all these trucks, and we can need to serve our shippers really, really well. How did you do that so quickly?
So it's the marketplace works on a lane level. So a lane is either a metro. We call a lane in our world is either a metro, so the greater Seattle area, where a shipment would pick up and drop off in the same location, the driver's home that night, or it's a point-to-point, Seattle to Sacramento, Sacramento to Phoenix, for example. And so the marketplace develops at that level. And one of the challenges we encountered early on was we kind of had to decide, are we going to be super local focused? And there's a category of trucker that's very local. They actually don't drive more than a couple hundred miles in one direction because they want to get home every night.
They sleep at home every night.
Sleep at home every night. And so we could have focused specifically on local. And we did that for a while. Then we started realizing that, most of the dollars, most of the companies that are really in need of help have more complicated supply chains than just shipping locally. So some of the shippers that we were working with locally are like, this is helpful, but what's really painful for me are these shipments I have that go between different geographies. And I need your help there. And we started talking to some bigger companies, and they're like, well, I really need your help in this part of the country or on these lanes, right? And so it was important to be very disciplined about what we did and didn't do early on, but we kind of let the customer lead us a little bit early to understand what the opportunity was. And as soon as you start thinking about, we're going to support this lane, now you need a truck driver that's willing to drive a little bit further outside of that local area. And when the truck driver's in that next location, if you want to think about how you keep them engaged with your platform, well, you might need another job for them. Otherwise, they're going to exit your platform, and getting them back's hard.
They're going to get to St. Louis and they're going to be like, all right, I'm going to go back to my traditional broker.
San Francisco or Oakland or something from Seattle. And so, we did local for a while, but we started to have opportunities outside of that, and we realized we had to kind of have a controlled slide. So we couldn't just go national at first, but we had to really think about corridors and parts of the country where we could develop that flywheel.
But you had, once you went beyond local, you had a national network effect, right? Because these truckers, once you went beyond local, they were the carriers. They operate nationally, right? So like you winning a bunch of carriers helps you with shippers in St. Louis and helps you with shippers in Boston and helps you with shippers in...
Big carriers operate locally, but if you're bringing on these 3 to 5 truck carriers, do they operate, nationally like that?
All of them do all of those things. There's ratios, but like all of them do all those things. So there's regional carriers too. Maybe they're out for a week, right?
Yeah.
And so you can kind of start focusing on that. So you're right. What we had to do was say, we're not going to have we're going to have some leakage. Like a carrier will come into our network and maybe they'll leave the I-5 corridor, and that's okay. We're not going to chase them. We're not going to go develop those other markets. Enough of them will stay there. We can't do supply and demand nationally at the same time. So we focused on the Northwest. And then we actually went kind of some West Coast, and then we went to Texas. And there's a story around that where Unilever reached out and said, hey, we're doing this pilot with some of the new companies, and you guys just announced yourselves. We were about to start with these other 2. Do you guys want to try it too? And I remember
there's only one right answer to that question.
That's an amazing thing for a startup to get.
Yes, yeah. I was really confused as to why they called this, because we were doing very local, like hyper Seattle shipments kind of up just in that area at the time. And I remember
you guys announcing this deal. I mean, this is
I was
huge.
sitting across from this guy named Lauren Seeks, who's been at Convoy from the beginning. I remember just literally doing a Hail Mary pass in the room. I was like, okay, here we go. And I was like, I'm going to say it. And so I didn't know what to say to Unilever, because I was like, well, I think I said something like, we would be willing to work with you guys, but we need all your freight on the West Coast.
Whoa.
And just because I was like, I don't know, I'm going to aim big. They offered.
You got nothing to lose.
Like, let's pilot that. And the person thought, like, I think I was probably half serious, but they could not even rationally believe I may have been serious. So they just laughed and thought it was funny. And then I was like, oh, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, where do you guys want us?
But really?
But okay. And so I was still learning at that point. And they said, okay, we'll get back to you on location, but maybe it'll be California, maybe it'll be Texas. And they ultimately asked us to start off in Texas. And we're like, okay, this is interesting. Texas is a very heavy local freight market. So it kind of fit our MO a little bit. And we went down there and we started with them in Texas.
Because they ship from city in Texas to other cities
and
in
we
Texas.
told them we're only going to do local. So one of the hard things we had to do, and this is very important again for a startup, know who you want to be and how to sequence. And so we said, we're only going to do dry van. At the time, it was only flatbed and dry van, but we really were only doing dry van. So for them, we're only going to do dry van shipments. We're only going to do local dry van shipments. And we're only going to do shipments that are not that are within this time frame. Like, you have to give us this much notice. And we kind of said, if you want to work with us, we're not going to extend ourselves into something we don't know how to do yet. And we're building this network. And the way we thought about our network, someone very wise early on said, when you're building a marketplace or network, you want every single piece of demand that comes in that marketplace to apply to all of your supply. Like, the ideal world is that every demand opportunity could be serviced by all of your supply. That is the least fragmented marketplace. So you will, in the fast manner possible, reach liquidity in that marketplace. So we looked at it and said, what are all the dimensions that split supply? And because you have carriers that are local, regional, and long haul, those are different. There's some bleed over between regional and local and regional and long haul, but effectively those are different carrier segments.
Yeah.
And because you have different equipment types, because of things. So we said to Unilever and others, we're only going to operate in this bucket. You draw the buckets up there, we're only going to do this, and we can't break that, because if we do, we won't be able to give you the experience you're looking for. And every other broker in the country goes to them and says, I can handle you nationwide tomorrow. Because what they're doing is picking up the phone and calling a bunch of trucking companies and not requiring them to use technology, not having to build a network, just saying, well, you do the job. Whereas we had to get the driver to use the tech. and to build this flywheel and try to have this automated matching. So we had to really concentrate early on. That was a very important lesson in not going too broad.
All right, so one more scale question that I have for you, or scaling question, then I promise I'm done. So we're in this interesting time in startups and the capital ecosystem where people are starting to favor unit economics over growth. And I'm curious your perspective on that general transition, but as it applies to Convoy, I'm curious about over the last 4 years, what are the ways in which you've said, okay, this is a good time to give on unit economics so that we can grow, and what levers did you use to do that?
So the two probably prominent reasons why we've done that is we have a customer. That customer wants to ramp in a time frame that we could not reasonably do with the support services that we have today. And therefore, we have to expand the team, like all dimensions of the team. Could be building capacity with truck drivers, could be providing customer service, could be account management. We have to scale those faster and ahead of the growth and train and get the people into the company and ensure that we offer like an A+ level of service. We're a tech broker from Seattle with a very short track record. If someone's going to make a bet on us, they're looking for us to fail on the non-technical aspects like service and support and really making sure it works end-to-end and providing that account management, the support, right? So we need to be great at that because they're going to assume that's going to be our weak spot. So one was over-investing, I would say, or investing heavily in that at different periods. And when things started to like crack, we might grow too fast and realize we're not doing that, slow it down and then reinvest in that. So that was one. The second is developing the flywheel. And the way freight works is there's no such thing as the price of there's no known price of the truck. So for a job from Seattle to Portland, you might have one truck that's willing to do that job tomorrow for $400 and one truck that's willing to do it for $900. You know, and maybe even less and more for very different reasons. One really doesn't want to do it, one really wants to do it. So the market's kind of made every day. If I take 5 shipments today and I have 5 trucks in my network already, I can probably service all those shipments with the right economics and pretty efficiently because I already have the trucks in my network. But if I want to grow my network, I'm going to say to the shipper, give me 10. I only have 5 trucks. I need to go get 5 more trucks that are less conveniently located that I don't know yet, and I'm probably going to have to pay more to get them on my platform. But that's the way to get them on the platform. And so in order to drive density into our lanes and build the marketplace, we would bring on more demand than we had supply to cover, and then use that demand to bring in more supply in each of those.
So it's getting to the reverse of the traditional marketplace. Like, oh, you're going to invest, like, let's onboard a bunch of supply, and then when the demand, we'll run AdWords for the demand. For you guys, you're like, let's use sales to onboard a bunch of demand, and then that'll attract the supply.
That's right. And there's different balances as the market shifts back and forth. But so in those shipments, for example, we would not have great unit economics. But it's actually the number. It's ironic. It's like you don't get a bulk discount in trucking, you get like a bulk surplus. Because the more jobs you take, any broker, the more jobs they take on a given lane, on a given day, spends more per average to cover them. Because you're buying a variable cost product that goes up with the amount you use. If you have 10 trucks, those trucks are going to be, imagine those trucks in order from cheapest to most expensive. You're going to try to get the cheapest truck first. So if I take one job and I get the cheapest truck in my network for that job, I have covered it at the maximum spread. But every additional job I take, the next best truck would be less efficient for that job.
It's effectively a worse and worse product market fit for that individual job.
For the individual truck driver in that moment for that shipment. But that's how you build supply. And then once you get enough, then you have a healthy ecosystem where you have a lot of trucks. You get the data to where they are. You can then start to efficiently match a job to a truck better than the traditional industry player can who's just calling around. And so that's the investment you make in building this. There's a dozen other things, but that's one of the investments we made.
So you could sacrifice unit economics for a long time to make sure you have like tons and tons of carriers, truckers that are constantly using the app, tons and tons of shippers that trust you all the time, so that at some point in the near future, where you're like, look, the spread between that one truck and that one shipment that has amazing unit economics for us, and finding that place where it's really expensive for us and we don't make much of a margin, if anything at all, it just keeps pushing that further and further out because there's much more liquidity on the platform.
Exactly.
Is that that's the long-term thesis?
And there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of nuance behind that, but I'm sure that's effectively how it works. And we're making a bunch of other investments. We have a big product data science engineering team. We have all these other functions that we're building to kind of build the brand and the technology and the infrastructure in parallel with the business And those are all upfront investments where you kind of, they can help in terms of your growth. But fundamentally, those are the primary drivers. Making sure you do a great job for your customer. It's worth investing early on when you're building your reputation and your brand in a traditional industry as an outsider. Screwing that up early means you don't have a chance in the future. And then being able to grow your flywheel quickly and building density on your lanes is very important and we have all the data now that shows when you do that, here's what happens. Like the world looks better, so we can justify those investments.
Thank you. David, do you want to move right into tech themes? Do we want to catch us up to today in some capacity?
Well, so today, where would you say you guys rank in terms of brokerages within the industry? Obviously, you're a tech-enabled brokerage, but give us a sense of scale for where you're at within the industry and how penetrated you guys think you are thus far.
We're still a fraction of the total trucking market. The truckload market is, about $600 billion a year in the US. And that includes private fleets and for hire, but we can compete with all of that. The largest broker in the country, the largest truckload kind of freight brokerage is doing about $10 billion a year in truckload freight. And then there's another 5 to 10 that are between 3, maybe 2, 3, and $10 billion. So that's the ecosystem of pure brokers. There's a lot of large carriers that also run brokerages. We would probably be in about the top 20, top maybe 15.
Wow.
So we're pretty significant in
That's
the brokerage
pretty incredible.
at this point.
And all these other companies are decades old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
For folks who are new to the show, we do a section after this history and facts called What Would Have Happened Otherwise, where if this is a traditional acquired episode and we're talking about a transaction that happened, it's usually what if that transaction didn't happen? What if Big Co didn't buy Little Co? I think it's interesting here to dive in a little bit of what if you guys grew at a normal startup pace and where you would be today? What if that risk didn't pay off? You told us a lot about it, but the way that I would kind of describe it is number one, there's numerous people who could have beat you to the punch on having a whole bunch of supply and a whole bunch of demand, truckers and shippers. I'm curious if there's a data moat here beyond just the marketplace liquidity. Have you, by sort of rushing into this and being an early player, what other things has it allowed you to do that otherwise, if you were, say, 300 people today or something and able to service the amount of volume on your platform that amount would give you, then what would you be giving up?
Let's say that we had grown slower, we hadn't really gone national, we wouldn't have a chance to write the story about what's going to happen. And the reason is that you can't really, we wouldn't be able to define the future unless the major players in the industry viewed us very credibly and were using our service. So the largest shippers in the country, many of them are now using Convoy. A lot of the biggest ecosystem partners, the events and sort of influencers within the industry are looking to Convoy for what's the future. And we're kind of defining it. We're creating a category, digital freight network. We're describing what that is. We're telling that story. And I think that you had to make a bet to be in a position where you were at scale, you mattered in the industry, and you were one of the first to do that. If you're not one of the first, no one's going to look to you for the story about what's happening. And so it's a lot harder for the folks that are a few below to influence what's going on.
And in a big way, these sales, you're making sales on both sides. You're selling the shippers on your platform, you're selling the truckers on, being a part of it, on taking the loads. There's an immense amount of trust there. You're convincing them ahead of actually demonstrating value. So it's sort of you need to be buzzy in this particular instance because you need them to be very receptive to working with you.
That's right. And we were, again, when we first started, I remember going to a dinner with a bunch of traditional industry trucking companies. And I have a lot of respect for the companies that are doing this. It's a very, very difficult industry. It's a hard job. Being a truck driver is hard. Running a trucking business is hard. It's a thin margin, complicated business. And it's hard to differentiate and do it as a traditional broker or carrier. But there was definitely a sense early on of, Convoy's doing this, but it's not really different, and no one's going to really take it that seriously. And I remember early on being told by our customers and by analysts in the industry that our competitors were basically saying, Convoy just gets the freight that nobody else wants.
Mm-hmm. I remember this narrative too.
Yeah, Convoy's kind of picking up some of the scraps out there. And, I remember hearing, sitting and listening in, and people didn't necessarily know I was there.
Convoy, who are those
Yeah,
guys?
computers don't match freight, people match freight.
Right.
It just doesn't happen. And
Ironically, computers matching freight is like an amazing use of computers.
it's a very good use of computers. And again, I don't think that they didn't recognize that it was
Totally.
coming, but it's sort of what you want to say because it's the right thing, and they don't have it yet. And there are some just really big challenges for them to get there. So I think, being in the position when we were gave us a chance to kind of write the rules a little bit and be the first to come up with some of the models, like the free quick pay model, the guaranteed detention model, the idea of providing data and insights back to your customer. So collecting data about what's happening every time a truck shows up at a location. When did they show up? How long did they wait? How long did it take to get loaded?
Yeah.
How did they rate the facility? What was their experience? That particular shipment, how was it tendered to us? We can correlate data across all these experiences and go back to our customers and say, this particular facility is underperforming other facilities in the region from your competitors that are competing for trucks. And this facility in this city is doing better during this shift than that one, right? And you should be changing your tendering practices because when you tender in the morning, the trucks are more expensive. And
They've never
using
had data like this
no
before.
one's done that.
Yeah.
And so we kind of started that. And we started a lot of things. And the idea of an instant price. You can instantly get a price that is committed to, and you can see what capacity is through an API.
Right. It's not going to get haggled on the phone like this is the
That's
price.
Right. So sort of, you start to get to say, this is what the future should look like. And that's one of the advantages of being early. And, others can quickly mimic that. And we haven't invented all of the things, but actually we have been very inventive, and we've been the leader in new design. And I think it gives us a chance that, our shippers and folks that are making kind of the calls in the industry and influence matters. Like perception is reality in a lot of these things, where if you're at a conference and the conference organizers or a famous freight analyst or a transportation analyst from a big bank gets up and says, we really think digital freight networks are the future for this reason, that starts to make it kind of a reality, right? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because then all the shippers are like, oh, well, then we should probably start buying into this. You need that perception momentum early on. And if you don't go fast and you don't get there quickly, you don't really get to contribute to that as much.
Yeah. And David, we're full blown in playbook now, but this is like totally one of mine is like in startups, in a lot of ways, perception is reality with the market, with your customers. I think I've said this on the show before, but one of the best definitions of a startup is from one of my colleagues at Pioneer Square Labs, Mike Galgon. He pointed out to me that a startup is very frequently just like getting and scrapping and biting to something that it doesn't yet deserve, whether it's a hire, whether it's a customer, revenue. Like you're not there yet, but like you're really trying to create the perception that you're there. And it's this interesting self-fulfilling prophecy flywheel of like, once you actually do get that resource and that person joins your team, that customer commits to you, then like you kind of are there. And then you can leverage that to the next rung. And it sounds like you guys have codified this in the Convoy flywheel, but like that is the business for you guys.
And it is every decision you make. So early on, you're talking to someone about a job, and like, well, I don't know if it's going to work. Should I join? I'm like, I don't know. Like, if you join, you're half the company. So like, it'll be up to you. Like, it's not like you're joining a thing that has
some good jujitsu.
Has like a potential, right? I mean, and it was hard to hire early on. Like convincing someone to leave a job. The biggest
Except for the
challenge,
5 people that followed you independent of whatever your idea was.
That's right. I mean, that was, well, no, I mean, we talked about some of the scope, but you're right.
Yeah.
We had some, but that was hard. That was trust built up over years.
Totally.
Right? I remember trying to convince a lot of people to join Convoy. And it was interesting. We had used in any tactic, and the tactic of like, well, you get to build this and all these different things. But the economy has been doing really well. So a lot of big companies have also had very strong stock value appreciation over the last 10 years. And so oftentimes the pitch that a startup has is like, that we'll have faster appreciation. But when Amazon is doubling, every year, then it's like, that's like
you got to move faster than
as well. Now
your stock price has to appreciate faster than Amazon's stock price.
It definitely has, but that's cooled off too. So but during certain phases, it gets harder and easier based on how well like the alternative is growing. And I remember talking to somebody that I was trying to convince to join. I trying to remember who this person was exactly, but I remember I was like, well, here's how much we think your Convoy stock would be worth. And they were like, well, I'm doing the math, and I think Amazon will be worth $8 trillion in 3 years. And I was like,
Seattle problems.
Why? They're like, well, if you look at the last couple of years of like their stock price appreciation or whatever it was, the time frame they were using, it was like the exact right time.
At some point,
they're like,
you have to start working back from GDP.
Yeah, I know. But I was kind of like, I was like, I felt so compelled to convince this person that's sort of physically impossible, and you can't apply like a growth rate to a company that scale that's like that. It happened for like that rate happened for maybe the last year.
Did you convince the person? Did you make the hire?
This is a while ago. I'm trying to remember if that exact conversation led to the hire. I believe they did.
Awesome.
But that was, I need a better answer for that. But that was,
Cut it.
But I just remember the conversation so vividly, and it was over the phone, so it wasn't like an easy like one to land, but I was like, no, you can't, please don't do this. Please don't make this decision believing this will be an $8 trillion company. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
And so, but it was hard, and that just emblemized like the issue of that perception, right? So what I did early on was, there were a lot of tactics we used to try to convince them to join, but early on, before that was a thing, I remember drawing, what I would do is I would take a piece of paper and the x-axis was someone's career. And I'd be like, year 0, and I was like, how many years do you think you want to work? And like, no one really knows, so they just say something like 30, 40, whatever. Could be more, could be less. And I'm like, okay, great. So, and here's your earnings. That's like the y-axis. And I'm gonna draw a curve that shows how much money you'll be making every year and like your total wealth accumulation from your salary, or like what you expect to make here. And beginning you're making about this much, it'll probably go up pretty steeply at some point, and it'll kind of flatten off a little bit. It's generally like a salary curve. And if you add up that 30, the area under the curve is your earnings in your life. And I'm like,
You're sounding really like a farmer consultant here.
I know.
It's like if you integrate your salary, you will get
exactly. But it worked. And I was like, look, just this 1 year, it's going to come down a little bit. And then it'll go back up if we don't, like if it doesn't work out and you leave after a year because this didn't work for you, like then that's the area of your total.
We were talking to your co-founder Grant this morning in preparation, and he was like, your reward for working in a failed startup in this environment is you get a better job.
Yeah,
like,
you get a better job.
Yeah.
So that was exactly right. So if you take that little dip, you either get like the bump from Convoy working, or you have this really interesting, compelling experience, and then your line goes up a little bit.
Yeah, you get a higher level at Amazon when you go back. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of, hiring's hard. We've had success, but man, everybody knows it's hard to hire effectively.
Yep. All right, David, anything else for the playbook?
Yeah. Well, real quick, my playbook, what I'd love to do, I mean, we'll work on this in future episodes, but because this B2B marketplace is so different and new, and you guys are at the vanguard, I tried to codify like, what are some principles? I'm curious if you say yes if you agree or no, but to drive success in a B2B marketplace, like
this is fun. We get to grade David.
Is demand drives supply. If you're bringing the money, you can align incentives in a market and get people to adopt a new technology that otherwise would be really hard. Like a GWiz feature isn't going to compel a trucker to download an app. That's one. 2, timing is super important. Like I think what you guys did with getting truckers paid to use the app within a day, like that's game changing for the industry. And so if you can change cash flow timing, and we're seeing this in other companies, that can be a huge driver of growth. So that's 2. 3, I really like what you said about those early days when haters were talking about Convoy and they were like, you guys only take the jobs that nobody wants. Well, it's like, if you take those jobs that nobody wants, you can take the scraps from the industry, but because you're building a technology company and a holistic marketplace, you can then aggregate the supply out of that and then get to a point where really, really quickly you have a better cost structure for the jobs that everybody wants, right?
And the companies will take you seriously.
Yeah.
You're operating at scale on the lanes that they care about. So you can use whatever you get to kind of get the carrier base going, and then translate that into a virtual network. And because we plug all the trucks into our technology platform, as we scale, we effectively have this partnerships that lead to this virtual fleet, which we have visibility into and a direct connection with, which gives us capabilities that feel like it's a more like first party network for the shipper. Yeah. And so that's a really powerful combination.
Yeah. And then the last one, which we didn't have time to get into today, but I also find it really interesting in these markets is you're saying like price is not set. These are not efficient markets. And so ultimately like your big goal is like, if you guys can be efficiently setting price in a way that nobody else can, well, then you've just like completely aggregated the industry. So that's my last one.
That's a really good transition into grading. So again, on a traditional acquired episode, we would grade if big co buying little co was like the right use of capital. And in some cases, you've got Instagram and oh my God, you couldn't have parked capital anywhere better. And in other cases, lots of other great options to invest that capital. In these ones where either it's a near-term acquisition or like there's no transaction that's happened with Convoy, going public or selling or anything like that. The way that I think we're going to do this is grade what the A+ sort of future scenario is for the company. Like, what are the things that have to be true in order for Convoy to create and capture a ton of value in the world? And what's the scenario where it's a lower grade? I think David put in here, what's the scenario where it could be a C-, where those things don't come true, and what are the factors there? Dan, you homed in on something earlier that was this concept that I really didn't understand before about in an inefficient marketplace with low demand and low supply on it, there really is only like maybe one truck and one shipper for which you can be profitable on a transaction. Or maybe, and then like you grow to 2 or 3 or 4. And if you have all the trucks and everyone who's shipping freight on your platform, then like, my gosh, you can handle a ton of volume and be profitable on those transactions. And for me to get to an A+, I think, only after like reading a bunch about your business for the last month and then talking to you today, I think it's going to be, can you widen that gap faster than your company consumes capital? It's basically like, can you create enough slots, enough matches between trucker and freight where each one of those transactions is above some certain bar of how profitable they need to be and do all the volume before some, run out of money, like the end game for every startup. Am I capturing it well? Like, is that how you think about it? And is that how you think about like, here's the spread of scenarios in our future?
Yeah, and so a big part of it is getting all the trucks on board. And it's really about making those truck drivers more productive. That's actually what this comes down to. So it's the empty miles we talked about. So Convoy can significantly reduce empty miles.
Yeah. Well, and that's why price is hard, right? Because it's
exactly.
worth different, same job is worth different things to different people.
We launched something this year called batching. You can take 2 or 3 jobs together. Our system will identify these jobs and look at all the possible combinations and automatically stitch together multiple jobs and then offer it to carriers with ideal locations to maybe a triangle or a round trip with the ideal appointment times. And we found that carriers will take that job for a significantly lower price than they would have taken each of the jobs in combination if you add them up as individual. And that's because we're creating efficiencies and making that carrier more productive. So that's the kind of stuff we have to figure out. And when we do that, and we actually saw the carriers that do that run empty about 19% of the time, that are, if they're really plugged into Convoy and doing the batching system today with our current density of batching, the ones that don't run empty about 35, 36% of the time.
Wow.
And so just when you look at like the impact on the environment, you're reducing emissions from using batches by about 45%. Like you're reducing empty mile emissions by about 45%, which is massive. That directly also translates into lower costs for the truck. The actual small trucking company spends less money to do the jobs because they're driving fewer empty miles, trying to reduce wait times, all these things. So we view it as, let's knock down the waste. Let's go after empty miles, unnecessary wait times, loading and unloading times, and just find ways to reduce those. And if we can do that quickly, plus add more volume into that, like lower the waste and add more volume, then we're creating a better cost structure. And then we're in an advantageous position and we have options. And getting that in place at scale with the capital we have is the key.
Awesome. David, anything else to add?
I think that's right.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to talk about one of our favorite companies, StatSig.
Yes, longtime acquired partner. There is a reason why the best product teams at companies like OpenAI and Notion, Atlassian, Figma, Rippling, Brex, and more rely on StatSig, whether they are iterating on their core product features or shipping AI-powered experiences at scale.
Yep. In the crazy speed of today's AI world, shipping fast is just table stakes now. It's basically trivial to build and deploy your app constantly. The real advantage is how quickly you learn what changes actually created value for customers and how fast you can use that signal to guide what you ship next. Whether it's a feature tweak, a pricing change, a performance improvement, or an AI update like a model change or prompt adjustment, they're not relying on instinct. They're measuring what actually moved engagement, retention, and ultimately revenue. And as more teams build with AI, that learning loop becomes even more important. Building with LLMs introduces non-determinism into your product experience. The same input doesn't always produce the same output, and behavior can shift in subtle ways in real-world use.
So doing offline evals will give you part of the picture, but you can really only understand the impact once your product is live with real users, and then you can measure how their behavior actually changes. It's very different than the way that you would ship features in a pre-AI world where you knew exactly what the software was going to do in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where StatSig comes in. It brings experimentation, feature flags, and product analytics into one unified system so teams can ship safely, test rigorously, and directly link what they changed to how users actually behaved. The result is a tighter feedback loop and learning that compounds over time, so you don't just ship more, you ship better.
So if you want to make learning your competitive advantage, whether you're building new AI experiences or just evolving your existing core product, go to statsig.com/acquired to get started.
Wow. Listeners, thank you for going on this journey with us. For folks who listen to a lot of episodes, I think you'll be like, oh yeah, it's about how long it usually takes. For folks who came tonight expecting a commute to work podcast, it's been longer than that.
Thank you for bearing with us.
Yeah. Do you want to do carve-outs? I have one I want to do.
Okay, go for it.
So, and we haven't done carve-outs in a bunch of episodes because we've been jammed for time. And mine is a very cool app that is based here in Seattle that David and I used last night for the Acquired annual holiday party that is former Convoy alum. So Vince and Shane from Mystery have created something incredibly cool. I think it's mystery.sh for anyone who wants to try it out. And you basically can set a time, say some of your preferences of the things you like to do and the things you might want to do that day or night, and then random things happen to you. And like lists show up and they take you places and you get fed, and then like you don't know how the night's
people
gonna go.
that you choose the people you do it. They don't like send random people to you.
Correct.
Yeah. So we chose to do this with each other.
Correct. Yes. So Dave and I went fencing last night. Who would have thought we'd go fencing? But we
was
went
super
fencing
awesome.
and it was amazing. So if you're looking for new things to do in your life, I highly recommend Mystery.
Likewise, it was a blast.
Awesome.
All right.
Listeners, thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you haven't subscribed, you can at acquired.fm or in the podcast player of your choice. If you'd like to become an Acquired Limited partner, that is glow.fm/acquired. Thank you so much to Dan.
And all of you here live with us. This has been such a new and awesome experience for us. So thank you.